Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. Welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. On this show, we have a special guest today. We have a doctor, Dr. David. How do you spell your last name?
Shokrian.
Shokrian.
S-H-O-K. Yes.
David Shokrian.
R-I-A-N.
So right now, you're in New York?
Yes, New York City.
How long you lived in New York for?
I have been living in New York pretty much all my life. I was about 2 years old when my parents moved here, and I have been living here ever since. Wow. I have lived in other places, but this is where home is. This is where my family's at.
So let's talk a little bit about your story. Where'd you grow up? What was growing up like?
So I am the first of 5 kids. I have 4 younger siblings, 3 brothers, 1 sister. I was actually born, I'm an Iranian Jew. My family left Iran right after the Islamic Revolution, and we came straight to New York. And I grew up in Queens, and then my parents later on moved out to Long Island. I can't exactly tell you when I knew that I wanted to be a doctor. I think it was probably from the womb. Firstborn son of Persian Jewish immigrants. It was kind of my parents' dream, and eventually became my dream to pursue a career as a physician. So,
what did your parents do growing up?
My dad is a real estate developer. He is, by education, he's a civil engineer. He has his PhD in civil engineering. He actually went to the University of Texas at Arlington, then went back home to Iran, married my mom, and then they had me. And then they returned back to the United States in order for, their children to have a better life.
Gotcha. When did you start talking to your parents about becoming a doctor? When did you start really thinking about going to med school? In high school or college?
Probably from elementary school.
Wow.
I was on the path. Yeah. So I took a not too uncommon path. I mean, I went, 4 years of high school, straight from high school, 4 years of undergrad. I was a double major. I studied both biology, science, as well as political science. So I always had an interest in law and justice. People told me I'd make a really good lawyer. But on the other end, I also studied medicine. And ultimately, I decided med school was the way for me to go. Right after college, I was accepted into the Sackler School of Medicine at Tel Aviv University. It's a combined U.S.-Israeli program. The students are all American. The classes are all taught in English.
And it's in Israel?
It's in Israel. It's in Tel Aviv. And I was fortunate enough to live in Tel Aviv between the years of 2003 and 2007. I still refer to them as the greatest 4 years of my entire life. I had an absolutely phenomenal education. I was trained by some of the most brilliant doctors in the world at some of the most renowned medical centers, out there. And upon completion of the 4 years of medical school, I was accepted into a general surgery training program here in New York, where I spent 5 years getting full training as a general surgeon.
What interested you to go into surgery as opposed to anything else? I mean,
I liked doing things with my hand. There's a certain immediate gratification that comes with surgery. It's not with all surgery. Obviously, there are surgical pathologies that are not curable with an operation. However, there are a lot of things in general surgery that you can take care of with a single operation. The other thing that I really enjoyed was the trauma aspect. The place where I trained was a level 1 trauma center. It was very heavy on critical care. Critical care takes a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of, decision making. I was always very much comfortable doing those things, and I was good at it. I never got nervous or scared in a situation that seemed hectic or crazy. And so to me, surgery and trauma was always something that was very Very exciting, very rewarding. You could literally save a life if you acted appropriately and timely. But but during my training, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of exposure to the plastic surgery side of surgery. My hospital had a very busy plastic surgery practice with residents and fellows. And during my fourth and fifth year, I was fortunate enough to be invited by a very well-known plastic surgeon to go on 2 mission trips to the Philippines to fix cleft lip and palates. So I was able to take.
Can you explain? Because I know what that is, but can you explain to people what that is?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a certain number of kids born in the world, some countries more than others, where they either have a cleft lip, which is essentially there's a non-fusion of the lip. They have it's called, a hair lip, where the lip is not completely fused. And then they can also have a split in the palate, which is the roof of the mouth. And the palate is what controls not only speech, but it also is, so speech is a huge thing when you have a cleft palate. And then again, things like diet and nutrition can become very much affected in these individuals. And a lot of the third world countries don't have the means, the resources, the hospitals, or the doctors to deal with all of the cases. The organization that I worked with was an organization out of Denver. It was called Uplift International. And the plastic surgeon that I worked with was a senior member of the organization. And he invited me to go along on 2 mission trips with him, one in 2006 and one in 2007. And it was like surgery camp. We would do about a total of 100 to 130 cases per mission trip. And it was great. It was nurses, anesthesiologists, plastic surgeons, pediatric surgeons, all just kind of going into these remote areas, evaluating dozens and dozens of kids with these pathologies, signing them up for surgery, and basically fixing them, giving them a new lease on life.
So, I could tell you're a doctor. You're very methodical when you talk. What are some experiences that you had? Because, to break it down, you're volunteering your time to go to a country that probably doesn't have access to these medical practices, or especially plastic surgery is probably like an ancillary thing that they don't even think of or have the means to get. So what does it feel like, or what did it feel like, or what are some experiences you had there that made you feel, some type of way?
So first of all, it was incredibly rewarding to be able to help these kids and to be welcomed into these towns and into these villages. They have Rotary clubs where they would essentially send out individuals to meet us, to greet us, to help us acclimate us to whichever island we were on. We would, be treated immensely well. The villagers would obviously, they would cook for us day and night, take us out at night to the local haunts, wherever they may be, to see the culture, see the area. Being able to meet these kids, meet their parents, see how incredibly grateful they were for the fact that we were there and being able to help them. It also gave me a perspective I'd never had before, because healthcare in America is so incredibly advanced. We have the most advanced healthcare system in the entire world. It's far superior. I mean, it's vastly superior to any other healthcare system. I remember one hospital that we went to, there was literally a list of procedures that they would perform, and then there was a price list next to it. And it said, if you need this procedure, this is what it costs. If you can't afford it, we can't help you. I remember in the other hospital that I was at, there was an ICU, but their ICU essentially consisted of family members sitting there taking care of patients and ventilating them, meaning that the breathing machines that these sick patients were on, if they did not have a family member sitting there and working the machine and ventilating them and essentially pushing oxygen into their lungs so that they can breathe on these machines, the person would die. It wasn't like the way that healthcare is set up in this country. No matter who you are here in the United States, no matter where you are here in the United States, you will find access to healthcare. You will find an emergency room. And if that emergency room is not able to meet your demands, they will transport you to a tertiary care facility, a university hospital, a place where you will receive, the latest and greatest of what it would take to essentially give you the best chance. But it wasn't like that in those other places. And so it gave me it was tremendously eye-opening and humbling, and it made me realize, how fortunate I was that my parents did make that decision to, pick up their lives and bring us to this great country so that we can live here and thrive here and, have the best life possible.
And how old were you when you did this? How old were you when you graduated med school?
I graduated med school. I was 25 when I graduated from med school. I was 30 when I graduated from general surgery. I then spent a year doing burn surgery and critical care in New York City. Another intense experience. I was a fellow. I ran a 40-bed burn center in Manhattan. I was one of 2 fellows. A very intense experience. Burn patients are very critically ill. They require an immense amount of care and an immense amount of attention to detail. I did that for a year. And then after that, I went off to do my plastic surgery training, which was an additional 3 years. And I finished all of my training, I believe, at the age of 35.
35.
I had done 10 years total of training since medical school. So I had 10 postgraduate years of training, and I have now been in my own private practice in Manhattan for almost 4 years.
Awesome. So when you're in med school, do they ever teach you like the emotional aspect of dealing with patients like dying or any type of like mental illness or like, because I would imagine that there's trauma that you develop as a doctor from getting emotional attachments to the families or anything like that. And most doctors that I've dealt with are like extremely cold. And I wonder if like they just become like that over the years or...
So yeah, nobody's born cold. Nobody's born with a thick shell. It is something that innately develops as you're a physician. You're not taught compassion, obviously. As a physician, you are compassionate. And I think that you have even deeper feelings for people than a lot of other people because you're out there trying to do the best thing, make the best decisions, formulate the best plans for your patients. And sometimes it's a success and sometimes it's a failure. But given the intensity of the work, given some of the situations that you're put in, given some of the circumstances that you have to deal with, you come to the realization pretty quickly, even as a medical student, rotating through through the hospitals, rotating through different clerkships in your 3rd year and your 4th year, that there are a lot of situations that are they're not going to end well. And the more experience you have, the more quickly you're able to predict that. And so I think on some subconscious level, you start to realize when those situations are coming, how they're going to go. And your mind has an amazing way of preparing itself to deal with that trauma. I do think that a lot of physicians, we are taught and warned to look out for signs of burnout. We are taught to look out for signs of stress that's outside the realm of what's considered normal for a physician. And we are encouraged to obviously seek out any type of counseling if we need it. But physicians are, in general, we're tough. We're we're very mentally resilient. And then as a surgeon, you are even more mentally resilient because you know that you're going to be dealing with patients who have some, trauma that is irreversible, like, traumatic brain injury, or if you have a patient who is essentially alive, but at the same time, is brain dead, or a patient who has such severe trauma that their lives will never be the same or they'll never make it out of the hospital. You also have patients you deal with who have certain, other things like, there are a lot of cancers out there that still will end your life. And it's especially hard when you're dealing with young individuals, young moms, young dads, teenagers who are dealing with, and then obviously the pediatric population. When you're dealing with those types of things, you do have to walk into that situation and try to put your feelings to the side in order to be as objective as you can be and do the job the best way possible.
When you were in med school, did you ever have thoughts of like quitting?
No, I have never in my life once thought about quitting anything I've ever started.
That's cool.
That's
cool.
not me at all. In fact, every time I've ever been told that I can't do something, I've always called it a blessing. It's the minute someone says that to me, I tell myself, you just basically sprinkled me with magic fairy dust because now it's going to happen.
Awesome.
And that's exactly how it's always been. Yeah.
I agree. I'm the same way. Let me ask you, when you were working at the burn victim with the burn victims, What were some of the like most difficult situations and also some like the best success stories you've seen out of there?
The most amazing situations was that I was working in probably the best burn center in the entire country, Weill Cornell Medical Center. They are the resources, the doctors, the nurses, the pharmacists are the absolute most brilliant, most compassionate, most learned individuals. And so I was very privileged to be able to work with those people, learn from them, understand how seriously they take their jobs. And then the amount of commitment and time they took to train me was really an incredible situation. So we had a lot of success with burn victims. I mean, yes, obviously, burn is a spectrum. You can have a person with a small burn that comes in for a few days, gets taken care of, leaves. You can have a pediatric burn, which is obviously very traumatic and traumatizing for the child and the parent, but you get them through it with an immense amount. And it's a multidisciplinary approach. It's not just the physician who's there. It's the physician. It's the, child welfare individual. It's the psychologist. It's the sociologist. It's the support staff. It's a whole team of people that would meet and talk about and address every single aspect of this person's care. So I was very privileged to see how medicine done in that way can be so beneficial and address so many things at the same time. And I learned an immense amount of critical care while doing it. We saved so many people. I was there for a year. I remember having patients that were in the burn unit with me essentially kind of be reborn. We had patients with 98% total body surface area burns.
Jesus.
It's an immediate death sentence, but I took care of them, and after a year of being in the burn unit, they went home. Their entire bodies were, skin grafted. They had to relearn how to walk and talk and eat and adjust to a new self, but they were alive, and they were grateful to be alive. So, yeah, I learned a lot of great lessons being there and learning from some of the, best burn critical care surgeons that were out there.
How do you, I guess, because, I work in healthcare and I see a lot of crazy stuff, but I would just imagine, how do you do that day in and day out and go home and try to live a normal life? I would imagine that it just dealing with that day in and day out is very stressful on just your spirit.
It is. I have a very strong foundation of people. I have an amazing family. I have an amazing mom. I think that I gain and garner most of my strength and my will from her. She is the most resilient person in the world. My dad has always been the greatest role model for me. He taught me humility. He taught me kindness. His motto in life was, do unto others as you would want done unto you. It's it's a motto that I don't even really think about anymore. It's just sort of how I live my life. I treat people the way I want to be treated. Does it always work out that way? No, but that's kind of, how I do what I do. And those were the people that I would rely on. And I would go home and think about my patients, but I wouldn't internalize it. I would think about what is it that I can do tomorrow? What is it that I maybe could have done today? Is there something that I missed? Is there something that I didn't think of? And so I would preoccupy myself with those thoughts, and I continue to preoccupy myself with those thoughts. I think about, my patients are a part of my daily thinking. Even to this day, I think about the person I operated on yesterday, the person I operated on a week ago. As a doctor, as a physician, especially a busy one, and as a surgeon, it's sort of at a different level because you're not just treating chronic conditions with medication and with, monthly follow-ups. It's much more of an acute setting. It's more fast-paced. Things can happen much more quickly. So your mind is always constantly going through a list of people, a list of things, a list of situations you want to make sure you have under tight control. And so, that's essentially sort of how my mind works, and it's what's on the forefront of my mind.
What did you always want to do plastic surgery, or did that kind of happen later on?
Yeah, I did. I always wanted to be a plastic surgeon. I remember it was St. Patrick's Day. It was my second or third year of medical school. And we were all out celebrating at an Irish pub in Tel Aviv. It was called Molly Bloom's. It was right on the beach. And, obviously it was St. Patrick's Day. I had a lot to drink, and I think I stood up on a stool and screamed out, and I said, I'm going to be a plastic surgeon. And all my friends kind of laughed at me, and they said, okay, well, that's great. But I said it, and I did it.
That's cool.
And most things that I've said that I will do, I have done. And I hope to continue to do that.
So I've never been to Israel. I have a lot of friends that are Jewish and are, actually Israeli and lived in Israel. What would you say like the main differences are in living in a place like Tel Aviv or, a place like New York, something like that?
There's very little difference. The only real difference is the weather.
Really?
Tel Aviv is, it's just beautiful all year round. It's on the beach. As far as nightlife, restaurants, I don't think that it has much of any kind of difference. I'm very much a connoisseur of food. I love going to nice places. I love trying new cuisine. Israel has some of the best restaurants and chefs and budding, culinary stars. Their nightlife is crazy. Much more in the European style than in, the New York style. There's a lot of places that are outdoors for half the year, which is, beautiful on the water. There's people from all different cultures, backgrounds, walks of life in the city. Since I left, I think it's also essentially become one of the largest destination for gay pride. It's one of the, I think they have the largest gay pride parade in the entire world. It's a beautiful city, and it's an absolutely beautiful country.
Cool.
It has everything from mountains that you can go skiing on to, obviously Jerusalem is there, which is mountainous and beautiful and holy and spiritual. And then you have Tel Aviv, which is very cosmopolitan and very advanced. So it has everything in one very, very small country. And the education that I received in the hospitals that I was at, and the way we were treated as med students versus the way that I see med students being treated here, we were treated a lot better.
Nice.
We were. I mean, we just were. We were treated with gold gloves and just constantly. The focus was about teaching us as much and giving us as much knowledge and information as we could possibly take away.
What are some things that med school didn't prepare you for, like becoming a doctor? Because I do see that a lot of people that have these MDs are not really prepared for a lot of, crash course in life or in business or owning their own practice. What are some things that you struggled with?
Med school in no way, shape, or form prepares you for any sort of business savviness of any kind. In fact, I think it's taboo to talk about how to run a successful practice and make a successful living while in med school. Med school's focus is to teach you the science and not even really, and a little bit of the practice of medicine, but the real practice of medicine is taught to you during training. That's why there are residencies, and that's why the residencies are years and years long, because it takes years to teach you how to hone in on a craft, whether that craft is something in the surgical field, whether that craft is something in the non-surgical medical field, whether it's in the pediatric field or in the psychiatric. These are the kind of big tenets of or subdivisions of medicine. So you have to get out and you actually have to practice and you actually have to get hands-on experience and deal with patients and try different things. That's why they say medicine is more of an art than a science. And it is more of an art than a science because although there's a ton of science out there and a ton of things you can refer to when you're trying to find a solution to a problem you may be having or some way you're trying to help or cure or alleviate somebody's pathology, you sometimes are just, you're left to your own devices to figure out what the best course of treatment is for that individual. So it gives you the foundation, and then from there you go on and you hope to find good mentors, you hope to find good people to train you, and you hope to end up in a place where you can take away from them as much knowledge and information as you can so that when you're out on your own, you're well prepared to do what you need to do to help your patients.
Awesome. What benefit do you think that you have from being somebody who is, pretty religious and spiritual over, someone who probably isn't? Because I think that a lot of people believe that, you can't be spiritual and science-based as well, but, there are plenty of doctors that are.
I toe that line very, very easily. I thank God for all of my for all of my successes, and I thank God for all of my challenges. I thank Him for everything that's ever been brought into my life. When you are spiritual, you don't necessarily see them as challenges. You see them as ways that, as an opportunity for growth. I have had those, let's call them opportunities for growth, come my way, sometimes more often than I'd like. But I've also been given the, strength and fortitude because of my belief system, and because I do, value my religion. I do believe I have a very, very personal relationship with God. I think we speak a lot. I think sometimes He's listening more than other times. I think sometimes we're closer than, other times. But I have lived through multiple miracles in my life, personal ones, and they truly are. And if you're able to see that, and if you're able to, have your eyes opened to the fact that those things are happening to you, and if you're able to see that not everybody is as lucky as you are to be able to survive and get through and have a positive outcome from some of the challenges that they're faced with, then you're very blessed. So, in your most difficult times, you have someone or something, some force to turn to and speak to, and believe that the things that are happening to you are happening because they're supposed to happen, and because they are happening to you to make you more successful, to make you stronger, to make you more mature, and to make you a better person, and to make you better at your craft. There's a very old Jewish saying, which essentially, I won't say it in Hebrew, but essentially translated, it basically says, this too is for the best, meaning that even this terrible thing that's happening to you is for the best, and it will end well. And if you keep that in the back of your head, you can get through a lot of difficult times and difficult situations.
What are some of the most difficult things that were unexpected that happened to you as a doctor?
So there have been a smattering of things. But for me, at this young age, I'm 39 now, which kind of seems old, but I still think I have some experiences and some living to do. I've had two major incidences that I think have prepared me immensely for being in the position that I'm in currently. And I'll explain kind of the position that I'm in currently. But the two situations that stand out in my head is, during my plastic surgery training was an incredibly intense training. I am very happy that I was able to, be selected into the program that I was chosen into. It's an incredibly competitive, cutthroat industry. So me and my wife spent 3 years living down in Birmingham, Alabama. I was very excited at the prospect of it. I had lived away from home before, so it wasn't a difficult thing for me to do. But my training down there was challenging in the fact that I faced an immense amount of adversity from the program while I was there. I was subjected to, some pretty blatant and overt anti-Semitism. There were things that I endured as a result of essentially being targeted because, frankly, I was a loud-mouthed, observant religious Jew. I did not fit the typical profile of the model of person that I guess the program was used to. I had a very close affiliation with a religious organization called Chabad, which I do to this day. And I'm very proud to say that it's an incredible organization that's very inclusive. They are a worldwide presence in the spread of, the message of Judaism. They accept Jews of all backgrounds, religious, non-religious, observant, non-observant. And me and my wife were fortunate enough to find them, and they became kind of like family to us. When this affiliation became more well-known, I started to become more and more and more of an outcast. Initially, it was a very devastating thing for me because I had always been in an academic situation or in settings in academia in my previous training programs where I was kind of I was very much liked by everybody, including the doctors that were, and the attendings that were training me. This situation turned into something where one particular individual who was in a position of power made it very well known that I was a problem in his mind. He went on a campaign in order to try and do whatever he could do to make the training as difficult as possible. Plastic surgery training is already incredibly challenging. It's incredibly demanding. The amount of hours you spent in the hospital, the amount of hours you spend on call, the amount of hours you spend on call while you're at home, the amount of hours you spend in the operating room taking care of patients. But on top of that, he decided that it was appropriate to give me an abundance of responsibilities the other residents didn't have, basically in order to push me to the edge. It was like a hazing situation, sort of.
Were you the only outspoken Jewish person there?
Yeah, but I wouldn't even say that I was an outspoken Jew. I was just
clearly Jewish.
I was just a Jew. Yeah. I wasn't, it wasn't something that was the only part of my identity, but for some reason it just, anti-Semitism can't really be explained, or at least I can't explain it. There's just something that irks people about somebody who is Jewish and who's proud of their heritage. And I think that that's what this situation was. It had nothing to do with my performance. It had nothing to do with my skills. It had nothing to do with anything except the fact that I was identified as this person. And so although there were other people within the department that I was being trained at that did like me, did not have a problem with me, they were not going to basically stand up and say, hey, let's not do this to this person. Let's not act in this way. Let's essentially not try to end his career. And if you look back throughout history, there's always been times where things like this have happened, and there are people who stay silent. There are people who in Nazi Germany would watch the trains fill up and get sent off to the camps. There were people in Russia who would not participate in pogroms, but wouldn't come to the aid of their fellow neighbors because they were Jewish. And now in 2021, you're seeing it more blatantly than ever before in the political spectrum, on social media, with celebrities. I mean, it's really now not even covert anymore. It's very, very overt. But what I experienced was much more covert. And I had a choice. Was this your first
time experiencing anti-Semitism?
Yes. Yeah. Wow. It was a very bizarre thing because as a Jew in New York, you're essentially a majority.
Yeah.
But when you're in a place where you're not, and I'm going to say this, me and my wife made some of our closest and dearest friends down there. I had an amazing experience in Birmingham. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful city. We have friends down there that we still go and visit, and we have friends down there that come and visit us. And so we were able to really make some amazing connections with the people down there. This was a very specific individual with a very specific agenda.
And for people listening, just to make it clear, like this isn't somebody who has a history of feeling judged or feeling some type of anti-Semitism throughout their life or whatever. This is somebody who this is your first experience ever and confused and not really understanding why this is going on.
Yeah, I actually couldn't figure it out for a while until I spoke to a couple of people about the situation and what was going on. And sometimes you need to speak to, some of your smart friends, and you need to talk to people. And when they basically told me, this is what you're experiencing, they called it modern day anti-Semitism. That's when I was like, wow, you're absolutely right. That's what it was. And so this was a 3-year program. And so for 2 years, every single day, knowing what was happening and what these individuals were trying to do and how adamantly they were trying to do it, I would get up and then essentially, put on my armor, get myself mentally prepared, walk into work, do the job the best possible way you could ever do it, being scrutinized, being under a microscope, standing across the operating room table with a person who wanted nothing to do with me and who saw me as essentially a problem, and get through it. And I did. And I got through it every single day. And every single assignment that they threw at me, every extra thing that I had to do, every extra thing that I had to write, every extra bit of work that I had to do, I did every single solitary one of them. And that just fanned the flames. It was, why is this individual not, succeeding? Why is he continuing to persevere? Why is he so persistent. Why can't we just get rid of him? Why can't we have our way? And the other thing that I did is I basically figured out how the internal system of the university worked, and I followed the protocol. I followed the system. I went to the right people, and I spoke to the right people, and I brought this to the right people's attention. And I did it in a very appropriate, very respectful, very systematic way. And I persisted because initially, you're not taken seriously all the time. You're not listened to. But when you're able to make your case to a group of individuals who are objective and who can see, through the things that did not make sense that were being presented to them by the program, they were able to say, maybe there is something here. Maybe what he's explaining to us isn't all in his head or isn't his version of events, but are the actual version of the events. And so I kept having little wins after win after win. And that, again, just fueled and fanned the flames to the point where, this individual said to me, well, you know what? If I can't get rid of you, then I'm just going to keep you here forever. You can stay. You can stay a resident. I have no obligation to let you go at any point. So if you like being here so much, then you can just stay here for as long as it takes. And I looked at him and I said, well, all right, let's see where this goes. And in the end, I, was fine, graduated, on time, perfectly, moved on with my life. And that was when I thought, that was me going, I guess, through my hell. I thought that surviving that situation, going through that for 2 years, I was lucky enough to have the support of my wife, and I was lucky enough to have the support of my family here in New York, to have the support of my friends there in Alabama, as well as here in New York. Obviously, I've always said I've had an excellent support system, which I'm very blessed to have. I thought, now it's time to celebrate. You made it. You're done. That difficult time is behind you. I would think to myself, and the lessons that I learned is that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It reaffirmed my belief in that. It reaffirmed my faith because obviously I prayed a lot and I asked for a lot of help and a lot of guidance. And I had a lot of people there who helped me. I had what I call a lot of angels sent my way who helped me navigate through this. And I was victorious in the end. And I made my way back to New York, while always sort of in the back of my head thinking to myself, even while I was going through it, I'm like, this is happening and I'm experiencing this and navigating this situation because I know, and I hated thinking it, but I said, I know there's something else coming. I know that there is something, becoming a successful plastic surgeon, becoming a successful practice owner, business owner, somebody who wants to scale a practice is a very difficult thing to do. And so I would always think to myself, this is preparing me for that. But I had no idea how it was preparing me for it. But I'm a very intuitive person, and I knew that it was in some way preparing me for it. And I always look back on the experience, and I'm grateful for it. And sometimes I look at it and I wish to myself that I could have had that, great collegial, professional camaraderie type of relationship with these individuals down there. But on the other hand, I think to myself, the lesson that I walked away with and the strength that I was able to realize that I had is well worth that sacrifice.
Absolutely. So then what else happened later on?
So when I came to New York, I was very, quite ambitious, wanted to just hit the ground running. And I started my own practice, essentially hung a shingle and started working. I grew very quickly. I don't know why. I shouldn't say this as a plastic surgeon, but I don't think that I'm some sort of a prodigy. I believe very much in honing my skills, and it took a lot of time and a lot of practice in order to do so. But, as a couple of the years went by, 2017, 2018, I started to do some really, really nice work. I started to have some very, very happy patients, and I started to, kind of become well-known. It's a small industry here in New York. And as you grow, you realize that it takes a village to run a plastic surgery practice. It's not a one-man show. It's not a two-man show. It's not a five-man show. You need a lot of people backing you up, people you can trust, people you can count on, people you can blindly listen to if they tell you something. And there was a very large amount of naivete on my part when it came to that. I did find some really great people that I still currently have as part of my practice, but I also had the unfortunate luck of having certain individuals who had been in this field for longer than I had been in it, as far as, practicing in it. People who were nurses and who were operating room techs and people who just kind of worked in this industry of plastic surgery. And they saw a young, successful, thriving plastic surgeon opening up his own practice, building out his own office. I mean, we have a beautiful, massive 5,000 square foot office in the heart of Midtown. We just took over another floor in the building. And so thankfully, we continue to grow because of the amazing work that we're currently doing here. But they saw an opportunity to capitalize on that. And what I needed then was help. I needed to make sure that my patients were well taken care of. I needed to make sure that things were happening. It's just like running any kind of business. You need to have the right team in place in order to run a successful business and have happy clients and have happy patients and be able to make sure that your reputation is maintained and kept intact. Mm-hmm. And I made the mistake of surrounding myself with a couple of less than reputable individuals. They knew exactly sort of how to infiltrate themselves into my life, all the perfect things to say, how to make themselves seem like they were irreplaceable and give themselves immense value, which again, on my part, I hadn't been doing this for that long. And so I took them at their word value. I said, well, you can do all these great things you're claiming to do, and you can do all these amazing things that you're claiming to do. And I'm in need of those kinds of services, and I'm in need of your expertise. And so we should definitely all work together. And for a short amount of time, we did, and things were good. But then essentially it grew into something that became extremely toxic. And I was kind of blindsided by a couple of these people who were I would call them my right-hand people. I mean, these were nurses, and these were managers that I had within my practice that I had full faith and full trust in. And their entire end game was basically to try and place themselves in a position where I believed them to be irreplaceable. And when I finally got to the point where the behavior and the attitude got too toxic to deal with within the office, they resorted to doing things and planning things and saying things in order to kind of very much damage the reputation of the practice as well as damage my reputation. See, as a physician and as any professional, but truly as a doctor, your reputation is who you are. Mm-hmm. If that reputation is questioned, if that trust is in any way ever put in doubt, that can be one of the most difficult things to deal with, and it can be devastating. And frankly, I think that some of the things that I have endured would probably have made anybody else's business tank, and they would have headed for the hills. But I did exactly the opposite. And I think that that's where kind of my biggest strength lies. I always do the exact opposite of what I think 99% of my colleagues or other people in my position would do. And I've been told by them. I have some very close friends that are plastic surgeons here in New York, and they're young and they're working to really thrive and build a name for themselves and build a practice for themselves without any of the challenges that I've had. And they all kind of look at me and say, you are like, wow, if we had to endure some of the craziness that you've had to go through, there's no way we would have been able to do, and we would have been able to be here. But my practice didn't take a hit, and because I wouldn't let it. If it makes any sense, I willed the practice into success. I literally would not allow it to go any other way. And despite, these individuals' best efforts, I've been able to maintain my core values. I haven't let them go astray. I refuse to let myself get jaded. I refuse to let myself focus on the insanity, because I think that the biggest thing that they were hoping to accomplish, besides sort of discrediting me, was to try and get inside my head and make me kind of say, you know what, this is crazy, this is too much. But
now, did these people ever go into like a real lawsuit or anything like that? I mean, I would imagine that another part of their motives are some type of financial gain.
So initially, there were extortion demands that were made, very foolishly so. After the extortion demands were turned down, I don't give into extortion. I don't know if this interview kind of portrays for you exactly the kind of person I am, but I'm the last person you can extort. Any other surgeon would have probably paid these people, off and gotten them out of their life. My belief is, first of all, you're not going to threaten me with some nonsense and try and extort me. It's not about the money. It's about the principle. It's always about, I'm a very principled individual. It has nothing to do with however many zeros were at the end of the number they were demanding. It had to do with the fact that how dare you? How dare you use this as leverage to try and get something out of me? And once the extortion demands failed, then they essentially turned to trying to do things legally. There were two attorneys who initially thought about taking on the case, and essentially once the actual details of the case were brought to light, they ran. Not all attorneys are bad. There are attorneys out there with integrity. There are attorneys out there with moral compasses. Just like doctors, they also take a vow to actually do what's right. And so if they see something that's glaringly and blatantly lies and an attempt at extortion, they will back away. So that kind of went on for a little bit. And one of the individuals, when she realized that she could not extort me and she could not sue me, decided to then essentially rob me. And so she had stolen, again, this is getting into the murky, into a lot of the details that I don't necessarily want to get into, but she had access to my office. She had access to a lot of personal information having to do with my identity. So she was essentially brought up on charges of identity theft, grand larceny, extortion, all of which the Manhattan District Attorney pursued. She was arrested for them. She was charged with them. And this is all, public information that's out there. But, unfortunately, my reputation and my name was smeared because it was kind of the last thing that could have been done as retaliation. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of sense. What are some things with particular plastic surgery industry that is unique in your industry? Because plastic surgery is very different than other types of surgery, where I would imagine you have patients that are, one, possibly suffering from body dysmorphia, extremely critical of themselves, never content, and you have to deal with some people that are not happy with, their God-given bodies in the first place, which I'm not saying that if you get plastic surgery there's something bad about it or anything like that. Some people, it's just simply enhancing their body. How do you deal with, some of the difficult clients or some of the difficult situations that's unique to plastic surgery?
So let me address that question, and then I'm going to address your first question, which is the uniqueness of plastic surgery. So what do you do with patients who have unrealistic expectations, and what do you do with patients that you suspect have some sort of body dysmorphia? You are trained, and if you're smart enough and savvy enough and intuitive enough to understand who those patients are, and during your consultation, you get a sense for those patients, you get a sense of who they are, by the way that they describe themselves, by the way that they refer to themselves, by their body language, by the adjectives that they use to describe themselves. And if you realize that the things that they are saying are so out of the realm of what is actually the reality of who they are physically, that is a red flag. And those people, you turn away. You don't operate on them. There are other patients that have expectations that might be maybe slightly out of the scope of realistic. And with those patients, you take a lot of time to really sit down and explain to them exactly what is possible. You explain to them exactly what the pitfalls are of the surgery that they want. You explain to them what you're able to achieve for them. You explain to them what you're not able to achieve for them. You make sure that they affirm a real and true understanding of what it is that you're describing. And if you feel that you have a meeting of the mind with that patient, then you move forward. I have had more than one, not too many, but I would like to say maybe 2 or 3 patients that came to me. They were very unhappy with their body. They seemed very rational in why they were unhappy with their body and with their physique and what they wanted to have done to it. These were patients that were being treated for psychiatric, illnesses, which is not uncommon at all for patients, especially for patients seeking plastic surgery, who after their operations essentially were cured, and I'm not kidding when I say this, of their depression. They stopped needing to take their medications. They slowly weaned themselves off of going to their therapist, and they're leading much happier and healthier lives. I was shocked when they came to me and said, "You essentially cured me." But that's always something that I like to think about, because once you took care of that one problem for them, their insecurity went away. And then for the most part, if you have the right patient with the right expectation and they're the right candidate, they're extremely happy. You have to set proper expectations. You have to make sure that they understand what they are. I tend to undershoot a little bit and over deliver, which I think is a lot better than over promising and under delivering. That's always a nice surprise for the patient. And then as to your first question, a very small piece of the plastic surgery pie is actually cosmetic surgery. Plastic surgeons are some of the smartest physicians and some of the smartest people. A lot of them actually have engineering backgrounds, because plastic surgery deals with every aspect of the body. So like I was talking to you about earlier, craniofacial anomalies like cleft lips and cleft palates, children that are born with something called craniosynostosis, which is essentially kids that have weird shaped skulls, that the shapes, the skull is malformed because certain areas of the skulls fuse more quickly than they're supposed to. These are very technical things. Plastic surgeons will, craniofacial surgeons will essentially take apart a 10-month-old baby skull and put it back together. They will fix huge facial clefts. They will reconstruct breasts after breast cancers and after mastectomies. They will do microsurgery, free flaps to fill in huge defects left in the body after cancer resections. They will do lower limb salvages from major traumas in order to save people's hands, people's feet. If your finger gets cut off, they'll replant it for you. I mean, these are all things that I did during training. The breadth of plastic surgery is so vast, so amazing. My practice we've become known as being extremely transgender friendly, and a place where a lot of transgender patients come in order to achieve, the multiple steps that they need to take in order to do the gender affirmation surgeries that they want. And so we have a lot of transgender patients who come here for body contouring. We have a lot of patients that come here for top surgery. We've worked with some very well-known and well-respected advocates and influencers in the trans community. So that's been something that's been very rewarding for me, because those patients truly are grateful. And after each procedure, and it's a multitude of procedures. It's from facial feminization to, top surgery to body contouring surgery that, makes you finally feel comfortable as, feeling that you are the gender that you were supposed to be born. And that's something that, we do quite a bit of here.
Wow.
That's plastic surgery, again, it's a very vast, wide breadth of
I didn't even think about that, but that's got to becoming more and more popular.
Extremely. It's becoming extremely popular. And the more, the trans community gains acceptance and gains recognition, the more people are comfortable and seeking out those affirmation surgeries.
Very cool. I guess to wrap up, what do you see that, is like the hell of the healthcare industry as being a doctor that you're not really prepared for in med school?
I don't know. Exactly. If there's one specific thing, I think that if you approach healthcare very methodically and thoughtfully, and if if you look at your patient and think to yourself, can I improve this patient's life? Is there something that I can do to help them? Do I think that I can do it well? Do I think that they understand the risks and the benefits of what I'm going to do for them? Is it worth doing? Then you will have happy patients. And even if you have a problem or a complication, which everybody does from the absolute best to the not best, then you can navigate through those situations because you've developed a rapport and a trust with your patient. And if you approach the field with, with arrogance and with a certain attitude that is not friendly in the sense that you develop a kind of bond and relationship with your patients, but it's kind of like, I'm the doctor, you're the patient. This is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. I don't think that that's necessarily going to be doing anyone any favors. There are plastic surgeons out there that have an aesthetic, and if you as a patient don't meet that aesthetic, they refuse to see beyond their own what they consider to be appropriate or beautiful or the thing that they could do for you. I don't think along those lines. When I talk to my patient, I try to understand what their aesthetic is, what they're hoping to achieve. And as long as it's not something that I think is outside the scope of reality or something that I think is unreasonable, I'm there to, make their, I don't want to say dream, but I'm there to kind of make their vision come to life the best I can.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we part? I know New York has been pretty, the whole country has been in kind of like this uproar with what's going on in the Jewish community. And
just listen. I think dialogue, talking, understanding, and hearing the other side rather than going on social media, reading memes and not understanding exactly what the history of everything is, especially the younger generation. I think it's important to educate yourself, understand what it is that you're being shown, and being, like all things, an educated consumer, whether it's a consumer of plastic surgery, whether it's a consumer of thoughts, whether it's a consumer of anything. It's important to understand where the rhetoric is coming from, and that history always has a way of repeating itself. So this is definitely not the first time that as a community people have had to endure, this type of hate. And unfortunately, it probably won't be the last. So, I think it's important to educate yourself and to be willing to have a conversation rather than just blindly believe a dialogue that is not complete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that when this all started, I was kind of like, I've never been to Israel. I have friends that are Jewish, and like the first thing I did was call some of my friends that I know are like extremely outspokenly Jewish and asking them how they feel about the situation, because I know that liking a post or screenshotting a post is like one thing, and I wanted to really talk to, friends and family about how they're personally doing and what I could do to support them. And I think that, the purpose of this podcast is to show people that people can go through adversity and have a positive outcome, and really the mentality that it takes to overcome adversity, whether it's in a career, whether it's through addiction, anything else. And, what you said was like a theme in your story is that, whenever someone said you couldn't do something, you knew that was them basically giving you an ace to finish it off, because, that fuels you when someone says that this can't happen.
Yes. My favorite historical character, I think, to this day is Winston Churchill. And there's a famous quote by him that basically, and the quote is, never, ever give up. Mm-hmm. I live my life by that motto. And, Winston Churchill is one of the greatest historical figures of all time. And through the greatest adversity of having, World War II and winning against all odds, it was that personality and it was that motto and it was that level of perseverance that got him through what he needed to get through and made him into this kind of legend that will live in the history books forever. So, that I think is what gets you through hell. Just don't give up.
Where do you see yourself, at 49, still doing plastic surgery?
Yes, but on a much different scale.
All right, cool.
Yeah, on a different level. Yeah, 10 years from now, there's not going to be one millennial plastic surgery. Hopefully, there'll be about 30 of them.
Awesome. Well, I
Yeah.
hope to see that dream come true. And, you've done everything else you said you're out to do. So I appreciate you. Just a backstory that, I met you through a close friend of mine. And, when she told me about you, she had introduced me to a lot of some other people on the podcast. And she was like, look, you got to do this doctor. He's got a hell of a story. And I just want to commend you for everything you've been through. I think it's very cool that, the work you did in the Philippines. My dream or one of my goals this year is to do a mission trip. And I have one planned in November. And I want to try to do that like an annual thing as well. So that was really cool to hear from you.
Yeah, it's extremely rewarding and it's extremely fun. It's not work. It really is just it's a very cathartic experience and you really leave there feeling amazing. So definitely do that.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Pleasure speaking with you, Bryan. Thank you so much.
Have a good one. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. This show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.